subscribe.
Popcorn therapy. Holistic health and wellness through the lens of pop culture. Hey, welcome back to Popcorn Therapy, where we are indeed going to talk about Love is Blind, which is always what I feel like I need to do a podcast about every time it comes out. And I have Emilee Nimetz back with us today. Emilee, is there anything you want to say about yourself? Just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name's Emilee. I use they, them pronouns. We've been watching Love is Blind together since season 1, I think, and we love to send voice notes back and forth. So here we are.
And sometimes facial expression photos as well, occasionally, of just our expressions of shock.
Horror, shock, confusion. Yeah.
Yeah, all of it. So season 7, should we start at the beginning or should we just get to Ramses right away? Because we have so much to say, I think, about Ramses.
So much about
There's
this
more.
guy. Yeah. Whatever works.
Okay, so, well, overall, I really hated season 7. I've had a hard time with season 7. I have enjoyed Love is Blind since the beginning, partly because as a therapist, I love to see people trying to figure out how to have relationships. I think that this show, when I was doing my counseling program, I had a teacher who would actually give us movies to watch and reality TV shows and stuff so that she could say, here's an example of anxious attachment. Watch this, how this person is with their family and stuff. And it was actually so useful to be able to see in these contexts, quote unquote, real people, going through these attachment dramas and so on. And I find that happens all the time with Love is Blind because, these are people who want to get married. That's usually a prerequisite for being on the show, although I feel like that's changed in the last couple of seasons. And they really want to get to know someone from an attachment place, right? Not just from a place of like, let's hang out and see what it means, but they really want to build a partnership attachment with each other. And so I feel like you see a lot of examples of anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, insecure attachment, all kinds of stuff. I think sometimes you get little insights, especially when you meet the parents, about what traumas are informing the way that they're behaving within their relationships. So I find it really interesting. There's definitely some of that in season 7, but this was a tough season. I feel like it was there was a lot of cruelty in this season. There was a lot of, I'm not sure if it was because everyone there was, quote unquote, in it for the wrong reasons and wanted to just get famous from being on this show, or if there was something deeper and darker going on, or if it's something about the city that it was filmed in. I'm not really sure what it was, but it felt to me by the end that all but one of the men was the kind of ex-boyfriend that you would have to talk about in therapy for a long time before you got over it. And some of the women were that way as well. I feel like it was a deeply misogynist show. And I don't know that the women were much better. I think there was some misandry on the show as well that was pretty visible. So it was tough. It was a tough watch for me. I did not enjoy most of this one. I fast forwarded way more than I ever have.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever have with Love is Blind before, but I was like, can't stand this, can't stand that. Let's move on. let's get to we know what's going to happen. Especially with the extremely long period of time that they were in the pods together, up to episode 5, which is unusual. Usually by episode 3, they're in Mexico or wherever they go. But it was I felt like it was endless cliches that they were just spouting to each other that were indistinguishable. You couldn't even tell one couple from the next because they were just spouting such cliches and word salad, about, I've never felt this way before, and you're the most incredible person I've ever met, and I don't care what you look like, just over and over. You're like, yeah, but we don't believe you, and we want to see you meet in the real world so that we can see how much we shouldn't have believed you in the pods.
Yeah, I find as the seasons go on, the level of authenticity is just decreasing so much. It feels like people there's an awareness of the potential for followers, for like how many people are actually watching this show. I think so it feels like there's a bit of an awareness of the camera, and so it feels like people are not really necessarily showing up in the way that the show, I think, wants them to, or like the so-called experiment, which, like, LOL, it's like highly flawed, very not valid experiment, unreliable as hell. Like,
Yeah.
it's not an experiment. Let's just say that there's nothing empirical about the data that's happening. But like
The test group is not representative, let's say,
no,
of most human beings.
no. But it feels like there's so much awareness about the camera and just all of that it's hard to watch, because you feel people trying to like be their own PR, be their own comms person by trying to like project a certain image instead of genuinely connecting, which is almost worse than like the dating apps, like dating in the real world, because like you don't have all these people like watching you and scrutinizing you and the potential to gain support. So it's like it's much worse. And it feels like, I know we had sort of message about this, like it reminds me of, like, not to like give away how old we are, but like it reminds me of like dating on like OkCupid and Plenty of Fish and all of those websites, where it was different from the apps because you could write like a whole blog post about who you are. And of course you're going to embellish some of these things. You're only going to present the best part of you. And so it feels like the pods, at least what they're showing us, is really that same thing. Like, it's just like the best way to present yourself in order to get, the free vacation, the followers, the viewers. Like, it feels like just like people are interested in moving past the pods. But because of that, there's just like so much inauthenticity. It's actually unbearable. Like you're saying, like I fast forwarded a bunch, I skipped a bunch. I think I watched the entire season on as fast of a speed that I could watch it. I mean, I do listen to podcasts on like 2 times a lot of the time. Like my ADHD brain is just like, blah, blah, blah. But like, I'm just like, oh my God, you're all saying the same exact things. And it's just so phony, and really, it's unbearable. It's like unbearable because it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like it's coming from a place of like, oh my gosh, I'm actually really connecting with you. It's like, I've never in my life felt so seen. It's like, what are you talking about? And I think this brings up something else that, I don't know how other folks feel about this, but, a lot of the time, I don't know if that's a producer error or if it's a participant error, because I do have this question of like, what story are they trying to cultivate? And I do feel like there is this big pull for the producers, and I'm going to probably guess like Nick and Vanessa, to really sell the concept as something that's amazing and long lasting, because it feels like what they only ever want to show the viewer is when they talk about their relationships. And I want to see more about like what actually made these people connect, not some sob story that you've practiced about like, your trauma dumping, which like, okay, we can get to that, but like not these things that you've kind of rehearsed about, stories about yourself, but like, do you talk about politics? Do you talk about, and we saw a little bit of that this season, albeit like kind of in a, we'll get to Ramses, but like, but like, do you talk about like your lifestyle? Like, what kinds of things are they actually connecting on? Like, and it almost feels like the producers don't want to show us that, because it's probably a little boring, to be honest. But I'm like, it's not as boring as watching them just like Hallmark profess their love to one another when we have no context for why those feelings allegedly swelled that much, which I do have some doubts. And then I was thinking too, like, sorry, I'm just kind of rambling here, but I was thinking too, later in the season, especially this season, I forget the exact interaction that made me go, maybe they don't. Because I think in the earlier seasons, I was like, maybe I should give them some slack. Like, maybe it's just what the producers are showing us. Because I will also say, like, as a lesbian, as a queer person, this is a fun way for me to observe heterosexuality, like as an anthropological experiment. I'm like, what are these?
The straights are notoriously not all right.
The straights are not all right. And so I'm like watching this being like, I can't believe this. This is so funny to me. you know, like anthropologically. But then there's, you know, I'm kind of telling myself, trying to check myself in earlier seasons, being like, well, there's probably things that they're showing that are like genuine that we're just not seeing because the producers aren't showing that story. But it's hard then to kind of like, you know, make sense of it all. But then in this season, like it felt like, especially with Hannah and Nick, you know, I mean, which was a really volatile relationship, it seemed like from the get-go. But like there was something about he made all these promises to her. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And she confronts him on it and is just like, you said you would do all of that and you're literally not. It was the same thing with, I felt, Steven and Monica earlier on when he allegedly in the pods, which I don't know if we saw this, I might have skipped it, but like where he's like, I'm going to get you flowers every day. I'm going to do all of this for you, which like, again, another guy, which just like, like complete, like, I mean, I felt like sick by him from the beginning. I think Monica was probably like, you know, hard to, what's that phrase? Like hard to notice the red flags when you're looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Like I think that she was just so hopeful, but then she just has this genuine conversation that was like, hey, like, you're not kind of doing what you said you would do. And he like freezes up and doesn't really know how to deal with it. So it is this thing where I'm kind of like, well, wait, maybe I was right. Like maybe they don't actually have like real relationships, or the majority of them, I guess, because some of them I think probably do.
So yeah, that idea of, you know, them being in the pods and just expressing this sort of narrative of themselves, I think is interesting because we must do that when we're dating to a degree, especially in online dating, because online dating is your narrative of yourself. Like when you're writing your bio or putting your pictures up or whatever, you are trying to tell a story of the type of person you are and the type of person you're interested in. And so something about Love is Blind is that they're not seeing each other physically. So they don't have body language, and they also don't have context, right? So they don't see, you know, how someone treats a server at a restaurant. They don't see how someone interacts with their animals. They don't see friends and family, you know, and what's the story with friends and family. And that gives you a lot of information, I think, about who someone is and how, you know, what their values are.
Yeah.
So I feel like those narratives are already going to be fundamentally flawed. And with dating, we always have to push past those narratives a bit to find out what's really under there. Like we often believe our own narratives, right? And we don't see our own flaws, or we don't see our own weaknesses. We tend to just present, you know, who we think we are. And one thing that I've found really fascinating about being married to another human being is like over time, more of those narratives sort of dissolve, you know, because you spend time with their parents, they spend time with your parents, you know, you start to see each other's humanity in a way that I think it just takes a while when you're dating to really see someone's humanity. Like, you know, we've been sick around each other. Like we know what we're like when we're sick, you know, and I think there's just the more I get to know my husband, it's like the more I come to understand how his childhood experiences inform, you know, his day-to-day life, what was going on in the sort of family system, and for him as well with me. There are just so many things that I wouldn't necessarily have described myself as that I think he sees me as. And there's something really beautiful about that process, I think, because it's very humanizing over time. Mm-hmm. And I feel like maybe that was my biggest problem with the season in general, was that these people were not treating each other like human beings. They were not. They were treating each other like, okay, this is the role that you're supposed to play as my partner. And as my partner, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't do that, you fail at being this idea I have in my head of who I think you're supposed to be. And I think with Hannah and Nick specifically, you see a lot of Hannah's projection of herself, who she thinks she is, her narrative of herself, and that being quite a cracked image, you know, like you can quite easily see through that image she has of herself, and just her harshness with what she's expecting of Nick and how she's expecting him to fit, and sort of the irony that she initially broke up with him because he felt too inauthentic, right? Like he sort of had this initial kind of like, you're saying all the right things, but something is telling me that that's not okay. And we can talk more about Hannah and Nick in a minute, because I think that relationship is actually really fascinating in so many different ways.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that, you know, you have to kind of talk about politics if you want to understand someone's values. And maybe it's not necessarily about who you're voting for, but like, what do you believe about women's bodies and like the rights that they have or don't have? You know, what do you think the role of a husband or a wife is? What do you think marriage means? Like, these are questions that we've got little bits and pieces, I think, in previous seasons as well. There was got her name, Amy, but his name I forget. But they had the whole issue with condoms as well and birth control, and like, you know, they had a conversation about abortion, and you kind of watch those two like figuring it out together and talking it through and all of those things. And I feel like that was new, to have a conversation around birth control and sex, which like, yeah, that's actually a really important thing to know your values around when you're going to be in a sexual relationship with someone. And I mean, I think the reality is a lot of people in real life also don't talk about it, don't express their values on it, maybe don't necessarily know their values on it, and then end up in these toxic situations where, you know, we're going to get into Ramses here, but, you know, we're in a culture that assumes that essentially women aren't people, and that assumes that men should want sex at all times, and that assumes that, you know, I don't know that the culture assumes condoms are bad. I feel like this whole not using condoms things is just kind of blows my mind. Like, I can't understand how people would.
I feel like we were texting a lot about that, being like, yeah. And I remember that season, I think it was last season with Amy, and I also forget her partner's name. But
could have been Jason, could have been
any of
James,
these old guys, you know?
We don't know.
Just some white guy.
One of these butters. Some white guy.
But yeah, there was like, yeah, I remember us just being like, and I think probably a lot of people watching were like, but condoms? Like, are we not, like, what is the deal with why not? Like, I'm sorry. Yeah. It's like, how is that not? I mean, maybe I've been very fortunate in my sexual experiences with men, but like, I don't know. Like, to me, I'm like, that's just such a given. Like, that is, especially somebody who you're meeting for the first time. Like, you know, you might want to just.
I mean, condoms are just your first line of defense against both pregnancy and STIs. Like, why wouldn't you just automatically use that? Yeah. It just seems when you don't know someone very well or whatever it is, like, it just seems wild to me that wouldn't be a given.
Yeah.
And I definitely have learned when I was a fair bit younger that if a man doesn't want to use condoms, that is your immediate signal that man is not for you. Like, if there's any pushback about condoms, if there's any grumbling or like, oh, do we have to, or I don't have one, or I don't really want to, or whatever it is, like, that guy does not respect your body. He does not respect your safety, right? He's not interested in taking responsibility if something were to happen to you.
Yeah.
That's just somebody that you can't trust. Like, you know, I mean, I kind of had to learn that lesson, as a lot of people do. And I think maybe that's a lesson that should be a bit more explicit in the sort of total failure of sexual education, you know, in many places. I think the US is much worse than in Canada. Yeah. You know, I got some sort of minimal sexual education. But that should be one of the first things to learn, is that, you know, if anyone is questioning your sexual safety in any way, then that person does not have your best interest at heart. It's not someone to take that risk with. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just a signal as well of something deeper, of somebody who isn't listening to you, isn't curious about why that's important to you, is prioritizing only their comfort or whatever it is that they're prioritizing, which I guess
even over their own safety.
Exactly. I'm like, do they not also care about STIs and getting you pregnant? And, you know, like, do they not have those same concerns? And maybe they don't, but it is, you know, a symptom of just this larger issue of misogyny and entitlement and objectification. Like, it felt like in a lot of the relationships, it was just, you are an object. You belong to me and you must fulfill this specific role. And if you don't, then not only is it like, you're not right for me, but it's like, you should feel ashamed by the reason why. And I'm thinking specifically of a few couples, but like, there was a sense of like, this is the truth of you as a partner in general, as opposed to like our dynamic as people who are in a relationship together, which is also like so objectifying in what you're saying, like dehumanizing, like you're not really seeing this person before you and considering, you know, them and their feelings, you know, baseline thing about being in relationship with people.
Yeah. And I think with Amy and her partner in that previous season, I feel like that was a little more innocent coming from his perspective. I think he, you know, again, if the culture is telling men they don't have to use condoms or sexual safety is not a thing, or that, you know, that sort of old cliche that like only dirty people have STIs, which is not true. They're extremely common and very easily passed. I think he just hadn't really thought too much about it. And I felt like in that relationship, he asked a lot of questions and they had a lot of conversations. And I think he actually did genuinely respect Amy and like want to know how she felt. And in the reunion and so on, like he got some teasing about this whole condom thing. And later he was like, well, once I kind of understood what it meant, like we kind of came around to understanding like that condoms were okay and we could do that and so on. Whereas Ramses, that is not an innocent man.
No.
That is not an innocent man. And I think that Ramses, I gotta say, this, I would say in the pods, like one of the things I do is I'm a somatic therapist. I'm very aware of my body, right? In the pods, I felt a lot of nausea and headaches, like watching this blah, 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 right? That, as you said, was just so completely inauthentic and frustrating. But as the Ramses story went on, I feel like I actually had nightmares about Love is Blind at a certain point. Not just Ramses, but Tim gave me nightmares. But, I think watching that trajectory was so deeply uncomfortable for me because in the pods, I liked Ramses more than Marissa. I think what I had against Marissa was just this perkiness that I have a little bit of a hard time with sometimes. It's sort of like an overly positive perspective. And I feel like as the season went on and she was facing some harder things, I related to her much more because, again, that was her narrative is like, I'm cheery and everything's great. But she was a human being underneath all of that I came to like and care about and like worry about. Because Ramses at first I was like, that guy seems really cool. Like him and Bodhi both seemed quote unquote woke. They both, I'm not sure if they use the word feminist, but in the way they talked about their values, they both seem to care about women's bodies and women's rights and things like that and have a lot of respect for Marissa. And, Ramses seemed well read and all of these things. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting guy. Like, we get what you often call butters on Love is Blind. It's just these very sort of basic, boring white guys. And I do feel like there was a little more diversity coming in with the men in this season. And at first I was excited about that. And I thought Ramses seemed really cool, like someone I might want to date. And what was so disturbing about this is that I've had boyfriends like that, right? Like I've had experiences with men who at first they say all the right things. They know all the vocabulary, they know how to talk about women's rights in a way that makes you think like, oh, this guy has really thought about it and he really knows what he's talking about and seems like he does see me as a human being. And that feels rare in a culture where women are still very much objectified, right? And then, all of a sudden he's saying, I can't even remember what the first red flag was, but it was like way past the pods. It was once they were kind of getting to know each other. It was post Cabo, I think, when after, they'd been having all this great sex in Cabo or whatever. And that was like he was getting everything he wanted. And then, it turns out Marissa's a human being. She doesn't always feel like having sex. And that conversation in the kitchen where, she's just like, I don't want to have sex all the time. Like I have really bad PMS right now. And there are going to be times in a human relationship where a woman is not going to have sex. And I relate to that very deeply, through, fertility issues, being pregnant, having miscarriages. Like there are times when your body's like the sexuality of your body gets confused because you're going through these things that are traumatic in that very area. Right. And for him to be like, I don't know if I'm okay with that. You're like, what? Like, you don't know if it's okay with you for someone to not want to have sex with you sometimes? Like, that to me is just like, whoa.
It's so gross. It was really, really hard to watch because I agree. I felt like in the pods, he was showing this version of somebody who's sensitive, somebody who thinks really mindfully about the world and about people. And then the second his like politic gets put into practice, it like folds instantly, like it's instantly collapses. And that was I feel like I still have like flashbacks of that moment when he's like, but it needs to feel good for me. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I heard something too that that Marissa has like an autoimmune disease. Like I think that she might have rheumatoid arthritis or one of these like chronic illnesses that just make existing really painful. And to just make this demand that she just have sex with you constantly and that you don't have to wear a condom. I'm like, you are repulsive. Like you are a repulsive person. That is horrible. Like true intimacy and love, I think, is what you were talking about with your relationship with your husband, where it's like you witness each other through some really personal, hard, difficult things, whether that's like seeing somebody when they're irritable and grumpy in the morning to seeing somebody who's like in debilitating pain or in debilitating grief. And it's like, if you can't, if sex for you comes before all of that, like, honey, you are not a feminist. You are not living up to your so-called leftist values. Like, please don't call yourself that. And please go like read some bell hooks and remember what the hell you're talking about.
And don't just read it to have vocabulary to get women, to trick women into thinking you care about them.
Yes.
Like, actually read it. You know, and I'm remembering too that in that conversation that was so uncomfortable to watch, that was after the conversation about condoms and just like, it has to feel good for me. And the shock I felt that they had been having sex without condoms in Cabo, I was like, oh my God, is she going to be pregnant? Like, what are they going to do now? She's stuck with this guy forever. Yeah. Like, I got really worried, you know? And when they had that scene in the kitchen, there was shortly after that, there was a scene where they were wedding planning and they were kind of like, oh, we worked out that issue. Ha ha ha. And it was this kind of thing of like, we had sex and everything's okay now. And I just felt this thing that I've felt before, which is that like, oh, well, you know, I have to kind of rally and make sure that I still am sexual to you. So I'm going to have sex even though I don't really want to, or like kind of find a way to force myself into the mood so that I can please you. Mm-hmm. And then you can be close to me again so that I don't lose you. And I was just wondering, like, obviously we didn't know what that was like, but was Marissa genuinely being like, okay, like this is consensual sex for me, or did it come from that manipulation? And I think that was really triggering for me too, because my sexual assault experience was so oriented around someone feeling like I owed him something, mm-hmm. and like there being a lot of manipulation before it happened around like who I was to him and what's supposed to happen and how like he was such a nice guy and like put up with all these things for me. And that's why I should want to do this thing that I didn't want to do. And it made me want to do it less. And then I felt like I had to. And then it ended up being this kind of traumatic experience for me. And, you know, I think that's probably why Ramses got under my skin so much. And I feel like that's probably true for a lot of people out there who've had sexual experiences with someone who like used the feminist vocabulary, or even just used like, you know, the heartbreaking conversation they had at the end when they broke up, where he's basically telling Marissa, you are too much, as it turns out. And, you know, I think pretty much every woman I know, it feels either too much or not enough at any given time, mm-hmm. because again, that's what our culture teaches us, right? And so, you know, for him to kind of communicate that this is your fault because you're too much, you know, not because I don't have the maturity to see you as a human being or because I have my own issues or whatever, but actually it's you. Like that type of manipulation is so disturbing because it's so insidious, and I feel like it goes the way it went with Ramses, where at first you're like, this guy seems great, and then there are these little moments where you're just like, oh, that was a weird conversation, like what does that mean? And then you're just like, whatever, it's fine, like, well, we got through it, and I guess that argument is over, and then something happens again and you're like, well, what did that mean? And, you know, there was a point where I was so worried that they were going to stay together because I thought this relationship is gusting abusive. Yeah. Like this person has all of the qualities to groom this woman into, you know, being what the automaton that he wants her to be. And if she goes along with that, you know, he's going to end up being abusive to her in some way or another, just manipulating her or whatever it is. Yeah. And she's going to become the shell of a person that I've seen so many people be when they have a partner that's like that, right? And I feel like, you know, so we haven't watched the reunion yet as we're recording this, and maybe don't need to because apparently the tea is pretty lukewarm, and we'll see. And we have like lots of the information from social media and stuff, so we'll see if any of it matters. But from what I heard, Marissa was sort of still trying with him, and wanted to date him again 6 months later or something, and he still like wasn't really into it. And I feel like that's one of those things where I've been dumped by guys before where I was so devastated because I thought that they were this great person for me. And then with some time and therapy and looking back, it was like, oh my God, did I ever dodge a bullet? I'm so glad that guy didn't want me to be with them, because if they had said yes and we had stayed together, I would be miserable at this point, right? Yeah. And I feel like there's so many people like of any gender who can go through those manipulative type of relationships, and they leave the relationships feeling like it was their fault and they're not wanted and they're rejected and it's all of these things. And I hope for Marissa, the human being, you know, there's so many reels and stuff out there about how Ramses is not a good person, and it is a good thing that they've broken up. Like, whatever she feels about that, which, knowing what I know about relationships and trauma survivors and things like that, she probably feels a ton of shame about that experience. And I don't know that she would ever listen to this podcast, but like, I relate to that so deeply. I feel like I've been in those situations, including where I thought I wanted that person to stay with me. I was not the one to break up with the manipulative guy. He was the one to break up with me. And I had to realize it much later, which is so disturbing, right? To sort of watch unfold on this show that's supposed to be for light entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Like, this is supposed to be like funny. Maybe people get a little drunk and jealous, but like this kind of, you know, showed some like really icky, horrifying. I mean, it's really timely that this reunion's coming out right before Halloween, because like,
yes, it's spooky season.
Spooky season. There are some monsters in here, like,
oh yeah. Monsters. Oh yeah, monsters.
True, like absolute monsters. Yeah. Everything that you're saying really resonates with me as well. Like, I've definitely had those experiences when I did date men, where it was like I would just feel complete shame and like desperation. And oh my gosh, when she's like in that moment when she's crying about him, like as after he breaks up with her on camera, which like I also feel like that's kind of, I mean, the producers probably encouraged that, but I'm just like, that also felt like, leave her alone. Like, in that moment, I was like, Ramses needs to get the hell out of this house. The cameras need to leave so that she can call her mom and like have that moment. And then mom can come down and kill this guy.
Yeah, it's time for Marissa's mom to cut the balls off. She knew it was coming.
Chop.
She was ready for it. Chop. Chop, chop. Marissa's mom.
Let's go.
Go for it.
Yeah. Green light from everybody. Probably everybody's giving you the green light on that one.
Yeah.
I've like just like the sound that she made, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been there. Like, I know that feeling, like in my throat, in my body, like how devastating it is, because I don't want to like project onto her, but in my experience, there was a lot of like, if I could just be exactly what they want, then this whole thing will work out. But then the bar keeps kind of shifting, the goalpost keeps shifting from the guy of being like, oh, this is what I need, this is what I want. And then you just feel more and more shame as that kind of goes on. You're just like, wow, I can't do anything. Like, I'm a terrible person. I can't just be good enough for this person. And like, you know, you start to imagine that the person that they want is the version of yourself that you think you want to be. And so to not be meeting that feels like a blow to just like your entire humanity, when in reality, that person is just really not seeing you for you. And they are making it, but then they're making it about you and not their own stuff. Like, listen, breakups are always hard, but like, there is a sense of like, just say like, this isn't working for you. Don't like string her along and like use this grand manipulation to make her feel like she owes you sex constantly, like when she's in a chronic pain flare up. Like, that's psychotic.
Yeah. So let's talk about some other monsters on this show, because Ramses was not the only one.
Yeah.
Leo didn't even make it to Cabo.
I was like, wait, who is that?
Leo, Leo in the Pods was a disturbing character who also at the beginning, you know, he sort of came out with this, I'm really rich and I didn't make the money myself, right? Like, I sort of fell in, I'm the only child and like a bunch of people in my life died and they all gave me some money, which, okay, there's a lot going on there, right? From a trauma perspective as well, like all my privilege comes from death. Like, that's something that, you know, you need to kind of process and integrate. There's also this experience, I think, sometimes that people can have when their wealth is not self-generated, where there's shame associated with that because, you know, they didn't really make that money themselves and they feel like they have to display it all the time. But also there's this guilt associated with it because it came from someone else and so on. So, you know, I thought that was kind of interesting at the beginning. He's an art dealer. That's an interesting job. Again, I was thinking like, okay, these guys are a little more interesting on this season. And I thought how interesting it would be to do that kind of Prince Charming thing where you do not talk about how much money you have. And then once someone chooses you for other reasons, they get to find out that you're also a prince. And like, that's a lovely fairy tale ending for them. Does Leo do that? No, Leo does not. He cannot stop talking about his money. Why? Because I don't think he thinks he has any other qualities, which we certainly didn't see any other qualities. There's not kindness. There's not mindfulness. There's not self-awareness. No. There's not intelligence, you know, like it was just, I only have money and that's all I have to give. And this very odd relationship between him and Brittany, who seemed sweet enough, but she just wanted to be a trophy wife. I think she said that. Yeah. Which I also have my own. I mean, maybe it's just my own stuff, but like I don't feel comfortable with someone just wanting to marry for money. Yeah. Well, I could go on and on about that, but that's a little disturbing to me as well. And the dynamic that they had was so competitive. I felt like she was competing with Hannah, who was one of Leo's love triangle, and competing with Leo, it felt like, you know, to kind of be, you know, that whole thing about the tables have turned, like now that Hannah dumped you, I have the power. And it's like, is this about power? Again, that whole idea of dehumanizing the people that you're dating. When it's about power, it's not about love. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so that was very disturbing. But I will say, as uncomfortable as it was, that was the most awkward meet between two people, like reveal between two people I've ever seen on Love is Blind. And it was delightfully awful. Like it was
fun to watch.
Funny. I couldn't get over it. Like I saw Guided Inspiration on Instagram does these sort of body language analyses on Love is Blind. They're kind of fun to watch sometimes. And she did this one where it was like, you can watch Brittany recoil from Leo, but really want the ring. And it's sort of, there's this like recoil and then reaching forward and the no and then the yes because she wants the ring. And, you know, she points out, Guided Inspiration, she points out that Brittany says, I love it, yes. The ring, instead of I love you. And just the way Leo was holding her hair within a fist felt also very abusive adjacent to me. Like there was something really like physically intimidating about the way he did that, that I really didn't like. And so, you know, it was interesting to watch Hannah and Nick later on too, because we can talk more about Hannah in a second, but those were her two choices, was Nick and Leo. Like even just from there, you're like, ooh, Hannah, I mean, maybe we need to work on our choices here a little bit, right? Like maybe we need to work on who we're attracted to and why. Yeah. And that's something that we could get into in therapy, you know. But Leo was, wow, Leo and Brittany were a lot.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, exactly what you're saying. It was wild because in his interviews, which they do in these big kind of vacuous rooms with colored full lights or whatever during the pods, and he's like, yeah, people have only really wanted me for my money. Like that's such a theme for him. But then it's like the first thing that he says to people. It's like, wait, honey, like give them a chance, like get to know them, like let them get to know you. And it's probably, you know, some self-esteem issues, like rooted in likely what you're talking about, where it's like he probably doesn't really feel like he's good enough or whatever. But ooh, it is rough to witness. Yeah. I'm trying to think, like when he was in that moment where he's kind of wanting to go for Hannah and he keeps leading Brittany, like keeping her there as an option. And like, I just felt that was so icky. Like him being like, I will have an answer for you, but I just have to have a conversation first. And she's like, well, so I'm a second choice. And he's like, no, I haven't made a choice yet. And it's like, and it felt very much like he was so excited about these toys that he was playing with, like not real human beings. Like these were things that he got, and he has so much, just like he has so much money, and he always has, you know, like he was always saying, oh, it's such a easy problem to have, you know, I'm so lucky, such a lucky problem. And it's like, I don't think any of these girls will actually like you if this is the kind of person that you're like claiming to be. Like you're very off-putting.
And again, we didn't get a genuine sense of why he liked Brittany or Hannah, right? Like that sort of what you were talking about before with, I want to know the real reasons why they're interested in these people. We never got a sense of that. Yeah. And, you know, I don't know, he kept on sort of negging Brittany too in these ways where he'd be like, everyone thinks you're stupid, but I actually think you're smart and no one else thinks that about you, but I do. And it's like, oh God, like that is not a compliment, dude. Like that's a horrible thing to say to somebody. And the, the monstrousness, I feel like, really came out when Hannah finally did decide to end things with him in this way that should have been quite simple, like, listen, I'm more into Nick, Brittany's super into you, let's make this simple and just end it because it's fine. And his reaction was, again, it was competitive and it was possessive. It was not loving.
Yeah.
Guided Inspiration did an interesting analysis of that scene as well, like the way that he was kind of punching his hand and using really aggressive language, swearing. Like, it was a very violent moment.
Yeah.
And Hannah was crying, which she later says, I never cry. Like, that doesn't happen to me. But she was having a trauma response in that moment. Yeah. Like, she was being aggressed in a way that her system was... crying can be not necessarily sorrow, but it can be a way for someone's system to seem vulnerable in order to get help or in order to get the person to relent, right? So crying can actually be, this happens a lot of the time with people who, when they're angry, they cry instead. It's because on some level their system sees their own anger or someone else's anger as deeply threatening, and so crying is a way to get someone to soften and stop yelling at you, basically, or to soften the situation or whatever it is, non-consciously. Like that's a trauma response that your body can do, is cry instead of yell or whatever it is you might really want to do. And so that was really interesting to see, and Hannah kind of recovering from that and everything. Like, that was quite a disturbing performance from Leo.
Yeah, it was quite scary. Yeah. I remember watching that just being like, what the, like, and I think part of it is, and this kind of comes back to this conversation around authenticity, like real connection, real intimacy, where it feels like, especially in the American versions of this show, that there's such an awareness of the control of the narrative, where you have, I feel like, okay, let me see if I can articulate this. I feel like you have people who, they want to position themselves either as like the underdog who, like, triumphs, or as the victim of something that will garner sympathy from the viewers. And so I often feel like on this show, people are just aware of trying to sculpt that narrative. And I think a lot about Raven and I forget her partner's name from a few seasons ago, where it was the whole time it was like, why are you saying yes to this guy? Like, you clearly don't like him. Like, the whole time it was just, it was very, confusing. And then she did get this tragic moment with, like, I don't know if it was a single tear, but it kind of had a single tear moment where her heart was broken. So then she could go to her followers and be like, like, fuck that guy or whatever, where it sort of felt like that was the triumph that she was looking for in the season. That felt like very, I mean, it was probably like horrible to feel embarrassed in that moment. Like, this whole thing sets you up just for humiliation, no matter what. I'm like, but it does kind of have that, because I feel like Leo maybe thought that he was like trying to let Brittany down nicely, and then Hannah would say yes to him and like everything would work out, and he has so many options and like like, just he has like abundance of choice and all of this stuff. And I think that he was genuinely blindsided by Hannah because he wasn't actually connecting with her. He didn't actually know how she felt about him. He didn't actually care, if she even liked him, because he had sculpted this idea that Hannah could fulfill this purpose in his narrative. And so when she didn't, his reaction became violent because he was trying to control this whole situation, and he couldn't, because you can't control human beings.
Yeah, it was very like, oh, my toys are speaking. Yeah. Like, my toys have free will. What's happening? I need to get them back in line.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Just very like, yeah.
Let's talk about Hannah and Nick for a second, because I feel like there's a lot going on there. And, okay, so Nick, on the one hand, he did talk in such a way that made it seem as if he was maybe more capable of certain things than was really true. So again, in the pods, he was this charming guy, and all of Hannah's girlfriends were like, Nick is not your guy. Like, nobody trusts Nick. Nobody likes Nick. Like, just get out of there. And I thought that was interesting because, again, my initial impression of Nick was like, yeah, I mean, all of these women feel the same gut feeling about him. Like, that's probably not a good person to go with. And it was interesting to kind of wait for the moment when Nick was going to be a monster, and it didn't really come for me. I think Nick misrepresented himself. I think he was maybe missing a few things. I don't think he knows how to make pasta. But I'm not sure that he was a bad person. Like, I'm not sure that he was really trying to manipulate her and all these things. I'm not sure he liked her.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, you know, he may have wanted to just sort of stick with it, to stay on the show or whatever it was. That wasn't totally clear to me, but he didn't treat her in a way that I thought he was treating her like a robot or like a toy, like some of the other guys. And, you know, that moment in the kitchen where he's trying to figure out how to make the pasta and he's looking in the fridge for the pasta, which if you're looking in the fridge for pasta, you don't know how to make pasta. But he was also like, how much water do I put? What temperature do I put it on? And it was funny because my husband and I were talking about this. And, you know, it occurred to me that, so my husband and I have this thing where he's a great cook. He loves cooking. He likes to make really elaborate food. And sometimes I just have very simple tastes. And I, you know, especially when I've been pregnant or whatever it was, I'm like, I need plain rice and whatever it is. Like, don't make your fancy, like, don't give me all those flavors. I'm not into it. And so, you know, we were talking about how we've had so many issues in the kitchen that there have been times when he's asked very specific questions about how I want him to make food so that he doesn't get in trouble, right? And I was kind of thinking about Nick in this way of like, maybe he's so scared of how Hannah's going to react that he's just really making sure that he's doing it correctly. And so I was mentioning this to Rob and I'm like, but I'm much better about that, right? Like I'm much better. I'll just eat whatever you feed me now. And he laughed and he went, no, I'm better at knowing what you don't like. Oh. So it's not that I'm less picky. It's that he's better at knowing what not to put in the food for me. So that tells you something else about our relationship. But anyway, you know, I thought that was kind of an interesting moment. And she, like, what I thought was so interesting about Hannah was just the projection. I think she was projecting a lot with Nick. She had that list of 5 things. One of them was Delulu, which Delulu, ego versus confidence, maturity level, and something else. There were 5 of them. But when she was repeating them back when they were breaking up and she was like, are you mature, Nick? Do you respect me? All of these things. And it's just like, Hannah, you're talking about yourself here. Yeah. And that's what's part of what's Delulu about it, right? It's like she can't see in herself that she's not doing these things that she's asking of him. Yeah. And one of them was respect, which like, you know, when they were first in Cabo, he said something like, I just really don't want our sex life on camera. Like, I would really like for you to keep that private between us. She immediately goes and talks about it on camera with one of her friends. And then later in the show, it's to the point where she's talking to someone about the absolute intimate details of their sex life together. And she's saying, you know, he doesn't go down on me, which again, Nick, you got to get around that. Like, that's another a little bit of a red flag where like, if someone doesn't want to go down on you, that's because they maybe don't like women, right? It's like, if they're not interested in like your sort of feminine parts, like maybe there's something going on there.
Yeah. Right? Like maybe he doesn't like vajayjay because he only likes
he's into other things.
Maybe he likes peepees.
Yeah.
Queer coded.
Maybe that was the whole problem the whole time, right?
There's this like meme that's just like, fellas, is it gay to be straight? Like where it's just like liking women is gay.
It's so gay, right? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, I mean, fair enough, right? That like that is an issue if Nick doesn't want to go down on you. And also like, it was so emasculating the way she was talking about him, so humiliating. Like he's just not mature in bed. He doesn't know what he's doing sexually. Like I made him from a boy into a man. I'm teaching him everything. You know, it's like, that is so mean to say that about somebody on camera. Yeah. Like your mom's going to hear that conversation, you know? And that was just so disrespectful because we know that he had sort of explicitly said like, I actually really don't want you to talk about this piece on camera, which again, maybe he's working out his sexuality. Maybe that's part of what the issue was there. Who knows? But yeah, I feel like she was really projecting. She was just like, these are the insecurities I have in myself. I'm going to see them in you. And the way that she was really objectifying and dehumanizing Nick, I thought was really more around like, you know, projecting those insecurities onto him and wanting him to be a perfect version of herself almost, or just really like seeing those things she hated about herself and getting mad at him about them. And, there was also that conversation where he said something like, I just want to be treated like an equal. And her response was, you get treated like an equal when you contribute like an equal. Which one of these two has a job? Do we remember? It's Nick. Hannah does not have a job at this moment.
Yeah.
I think and she's the one with debt and all these things. Like, there's not a lot of self-awareness there.
I feel like it's again, like the objectifying of somebody else where I think that she probably feels a lot of pressure to be seen a certain way because of her insecurities around her body and all of these things. That if he's not becoming her side piece, who's this perfect object of affection that is like this thing that she can tote around and be like, see, look, I am desirable. I am lovable because I have this boyfriend who's behaving in this amazing way, without really like actually seeing him for what he's doing, which, like, again, it's okay to break up with somebody because like your lifestyles don't match or because your values aren't aligned. Like, those are probably very respectful things to break up over somebody, but like to just sort of go like, you're like, it was just so like, teacher is mad at you and you're being a bad student.
Yeah.
And like the way that she pulls out this list as if like in the 3 to 4 weeks that they were dating, he would have completely changed his entire personality. And it was like, it's one thing to be like, okay, you need to learn how to like, take out the trash or whatever, or like, if you want to be in this partnership, it's clear that like there's cleanliness of the home is a really important thing. So it's like, are you willing to like modify some behaviors to like do that? Okay, that's a great question. But to completely ask him to change his entire personality, which I think...
And I think he said at one point, I am trying to change my personality for you. I think he said those words.
I think he did too, because I was like, what? Like... First of all, personality, really hard thing to change. Like, it's a really hard thing to change. And if you're in a situation where you like live in your parents' basement, you've never gone down on a woman, you don't know how to cook pasta, like, yeah, maybe there's going to be some things you might want to examine, but I don't think in 3 weeks you're going to just like become this like person that Hannah wants you to be. And then it's like, are you even asking yourself if you want that? Like, do you want to fit her idea of what maturity is? Because she's not being very mindful of her own actions and how she's making you feel. And I think that she might feel a little entitled to that because you're like dropping in the ball in this way. But it's like, it felt just very much like, I don't know, it was something very like 90s straight coded to me about like nagging wife and like husband who's like, I guess I suck. Like, I was just like, oh my God, like this is no, we're going backwards here. What are we doing?
Yeah, there was also a moment when Hannah was saying to her mom, Nick and I don't match intellectually. We don't match on humor. We don't match on values. She had like 5 things that they didn't match on. And her mom goes, none of that matters if you're in love. And I was like, oh, Hannah's mom. Like, that's what do you... No, like, all of that
all is
so
part
much.
Of,
like,
actually.
If you don't have those things, you don't like each other. Like, you just don't enjoy each other's company. Like, it's very like, basic stuff, right?
Like, what did you talk about in the pods? Like, I keep getting back, and I think it was a Nick and Hannah moment where I sort of was like, wait, no, they don't have real relationships in the pods. Like, I did feel kind of like, no, yeah, it is all fake. It is, like, heterosexuality is it's dicey at best, because it's like, what are they talking about if they didn't figure out they had like incompatible senses of humor, incompatible senses of like finances and like stability, home life, cooking. Like, what did they talk about other than, I guess, bickering about him kind of being a playboy, or like, I don't really know. And also that was clearly this like thing that he was doing that it reminded me of that season with Shane and Shake, and Shake was a bit more like maybe sociopathic, but like with Shane, he was like, do you wear crop tops? Like this just absolute himbo of a guy being like, tell me about your body.
That's all he wanted to know was about the crop tops. Yeah.
Yeah. And
their whole relationship was based on crop tops.
Yeah. And it reminded me of that, like how he was like, how he was just like, I can't wait to see you in a bathing suit. And she was like, I've talked to you so many times about my body insecurities. And he was just like, no, it's because you're beautiful inside and out. And I'm like, you have no idea.
It's not
like, no idea what you're talking about. And I agree. I feel like Nick, it felt less vindictive in the way. He did feel a bit more himbo-y, like a bit more like didn't really know. There is, I feel like he also really didn't like her. Like that was kind of, I think, what separates him from maybe Shane or something. But like, there was a sense that I don't think that he really liked her, and that he was just kind of like gritting his teeth to try and push through a little bit. So we didn't necessarily see all of that. But I do agree that it didn't feel like he wasn't a manipulative mastermind, or like she was being quite cruel to him. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and the ick is something I wanted to mention too, when he is playing on the ducks in Mexico with like, I don't know, he's just playing like whatever. But the whole thing about the ick, I feel like there's a cultural moment with the ick right now. It was also on the show Nobody Wants This, where just a character gets the ick from her boyfriend, and it's like, well, no one's ever come back from the ick before, so I guess it's over.
Yeah.
And then they do. But, I think that whole concept of the ick is kind of interesting. I mean, I've gotten the ick before, but it's been like very early on in a relationship where something has been, it's usually been something like this person doesn't clean their apartment ever, and their apartment is squalor. And that is icky because that's just not, it sort of shows me that we don't share the same values, and like that's not somebody that I want to be with. And so that's kind of that moment where you're like, yeah, I think it's a no. And that's like early on when you're dating and you're trying to figure out if it's a yes or a no or not. For me, once I'm in love, I don't get the ick. Like that doesn't really happen. I was deeply in love with someone who had maggots in his garbage can for a while, and I did get the ick from that. I was just like, oh, this poor guy's got like, let me help him with his maggots.
It for you.
So anyway, that's a whole other story. But I feel like there's something about that is actually a little misandristic. And I've seen some things about it where, someone has a list for the classic icks that women can get. And it's either not masculine enough or too feminine. To go back to that sort of idea of how people are working with gender and sexuality and dehumanization, right? So, if someone gets the ick because you want to play, you're being not masculine enough or too feminine, right? It's like you're showing too much of your emotion and your vulnerability, and that's giving me the ick, right? And that whole idea that one moment of ick can be the moment where I no longer like you. It can often be a moment of like, I watched him chase a ping pong ball across the room and like couldn't catch it, and that gave me the ick. And I feel like in some ways it's like, oh, the ick is that moment where you realize someone's a human being and not just the robot doll that you thought they were, right? And especially when it's something like that, like someone's failing at catching a ball, that's just a very human thing that anyone can do. Like it feels very dehumanizing, to go back to that theme, that you can have an ick all of a sudden and then that person is no longer interesting to you, and that the idea that ick could actually be the moment where they seem human. And I feel like that's what often happens at this show, is that the ick, quote unquote ick, comes up when someone is too human. They're not robot doll enough.
Yeah. And okay, a few responses to that. So I feel like, yeah, the ways in which these men, like for Nick, he was just being playful and like being silly goofy, and the way that she felt, because I feel like the ick is this really like, it's like this minor thing that's kind of embarrassing, like almost like Fremdschämen, like secondhand embarrassment, where you're a bit like, oh my God, why are you saying that? Like, why are you being so friendly to that person that you don't know? Or like, I don't know, like little things, just like, I don't know why that came up. It's great to be friendly. Like, wait, hold on. Let me backtrack. That's not what I mean. Just like people who might be like a bit too, like being a bit kind of goofy, or like, yeah, kind of, I think it's more about like people who are sort of embarrassing you, but like, yeah, like watch somebody like bowling with their legs bent or something, like, like something where it's like they physically kind of look funny and you're sort of embarrassed for them. I think that's kind of what I sort of read as the ick. I think that it's a cultural thing, like a really big thing in Gen Z. They often say millennials give them the ick, or are pretty cringy, like that whole concept. But what was really shocking to me was actually how deeply angry it made Hannah. Like, I thought that was really, because it's like, oh God, that guy's doing that thing over there. Oh my God, does he think he looks cool? He doesn't. Like, to me, that's kind of more what the ick is. It's not like this person who you fell in love with, who said he looked like Henry Cavill or whatever that actor's name, and he obviously doesn't. Like, He's saying this and she's like, huh. But it's like this person who you allegedly fell in love with is just like being playful, like in a resort, like you're supposed to be having this wonderful time. And instantly you're like, you humiliated me, which I was just like, that is not, to me, that's not the ick. Like, I think that what you're saying, it's like as something more deep rooted. Like I would read it actually as misogyny, where it's like that he's not masculine enough. Like, him not seeming like how he needs to be as a man, because like masculinity is this specific thing that you have to maintain. And so yeah, it sort of felt like
and can't have any femininity in it.
Yeah, exactly. So for him to be playful with like some woman and they're kind of giggling like because and that her being like so hurt by the fact that that woman joked that she was jealous of her, when it's like clearly that woman didn't like mean that. Like that was like she was just kind of being silly because Nick was trying to diffuse the situation by being kind of goofy. It just felt very like there was something else going on there for sure, because to me it was like far more rooted in like a hatred and a loathing of him than it was in just like, ooh, that guy's kind of embarrassing me. Like, no, he's being silly. And do you not want to have a partner who you can like be silly and goofy with? Like that's again, very strange to me.
I don't think Hannah did. Yeah, I feel like the insecurity is so strong that being goofy or silly or vulnerable like aren't on her list right at the moment, right? I think the ick can also be avoidant attachment, right? I think that's how it comes out in Nobody Wants This, which is a whole other show that, I could do a podcast about too, that I loved. But, I think in that case, it's someone who is used to just dumping guys very early on and has a difficult relationship with her dad and has avoidant attachment where she feels safer alone. And that's what a lot of that show is about. And so getting past the ick is sort of recognizing that, oh, what was icking her out about her boyfriend was that he was being kind to her parents and wanted to impress them. And that's what gave her the ick, Yeah. And so they were able to talk that through and be like, so why did that give you that visceral reaction? Like, is it because you've never had that before? Is it because, you're not used to men treating you in a way where, you matter? And that sort of allowed her to kind of see like, oh, maybe that's sort of a part of my attachment issues and not just this like funny pop culture word, where I can just ditch whoever I want, just saying I got the ick. Right?
An easy out. Like, it's just like
an easy out.
Oh, now that everything's ruined, I don't see you as a sexual person. And it's like, oh, you don't see them as sexual because they are being nice or because they're being vulnerable or because they're being silly. Like, to me, that's really deeply rooted like stuff that you've got to really examine to be able to get through.
Definitely. Yeah. So we have to wrap up, and we haven't even talked about Tyler and his sperm donor babies. So maybe we'll have to do a little part 2, especially if there is any hot tea in the reunion, things that we need to discuss, because, there's more that we could talk about with this show for sure.
Yeah.
So just thank you for your thoughts. And, I'm glad that we got some of that Ramses stuff off our chest because I really needed to talk about that. Maybe we'll be back with more, but thanks so much in the meantime, Emilee, for joining me to talk about the horrifying, monstrous, spooky season 7.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Bye, Emilee. So Emilee and I had so much to say about Love is Blind season 7 that we are going to do a part 2. So we've decided we're going to watch the reunion and then catch back up, and we'll continue to explore a little bit more about some of the relationships that we see, especially with whatever comes up in the reunion. So stay tuned for that. I will post it as soon as I possibly can. As always, if you want to get in touch with me, you can do that at juliepeters.ca. You can find me as a counselor there. You can set up a tarot reading. You can check out my blog posts, my meditations, my online yoga studio, all kinds of stuff on there. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, it's at Julie Peters Wellness, and on TikTok, it's Popcorn Therapy. It would really help me a lot if you would follow this show, share it with your friends. and just help, to get the podcast in front of more people so that more people can listen to it. I would really appreciate that if you can take the time to do that. So thank you so much for listening, and please be in touch with your thoughts about Love is Blind or anything else, and I'll get you that part 2 as soon as I can. Thanks for listening.